Good evening, everyone. My name is Armine Matensian. I am the second vice president of NAMI Tri-Valley. We have several board members online with us. We'd like to welcome you to our April general meeting, open to public. We do a monthly meeting with different guest speakers, and we always open and encourage you to tell us who you want to hear from, how we can bring the community, the services available, how we can answer questions. We're all in this together. So today, this session is going to be recorded and we'll be sharing it in our social media. I wanted to say website, but we have Facebook and also YouTube channel. So this way, we want to spread the message. We are very happy and lucky today to have two veterans with us. But before I get there, let me just remind you, anyone online or watching us, if interested to, hold on. All right, now it's better. I had the message on my screen. So if you're a NAMI Tri-Valley member, we applaud you. If you're interested in joining NAMI Tri-Valley, it's a very simple process. Marcia may share the link while I'm talking. We have a website, we have Facebook, YouTube channel. We definitely have a distribution list to communicate. There's 3 ways of joining: household, regular membership, and open membership. Open is for people who cannot afford much, but we prefer household, and regular open membership is only $5. So money should not be an issue for joining. If you have people interested, family members, friends, spread the news. But we're not here to advertise ourselves, we're here to help ourselves, right? So without any further ado, I guess, Marcia, maybe we can put the link of our NAMI Tri-Valley on the chat for people to see. Yeah. So today we have 2 very, very special guests. They were NAMI Tri-Valley friends before I was even a NAMI member, and I've been a NAMI member 8 years. So our special guests, looking at us on the screen, name says Beverly, don't be fooled. They're both there. We can see Francesca now.
Yes.
Francesca Tenenbaum is a director of Patients' Rights Advocates Program for Alameda County, Marin County, and San Mateo County. And there is a new title added, Director of Grievance Program. Maybe we'll hear a little bit about that. She has 30 years of experience in advocacy and has been a patients' rights advocate for over 25 years. We're talking experience, we're talking wisdom, and we can't wait to hear what's going on and what's new. She's been, along with Beverly, our guests, pretty much every year I've been here, and always we walked away with excitement, something new we learned, always helped me, and I'm speaking on behalf of our board, I guess. So also, Beverly, who we don't see there, but I'm going to introduce, and then we can, there she is. Thank you, Beverly. So Beverly is our advocacy expert. Beverly Bergman is a 20-year staff member at the Mental Health Association of Alameda County. Her expertise as a benefit advocate for 11 years successfully helped over 500 people receive SSI, SSDI. Boy, I know how painful that can be. I'm right in the middle of it through thick and thin. Past 13 years, Beverly has advocated for families, caregivers by providing support, advice, education, and advocacy. Information referrals has helped over thousands of families and community members over the years, okay? So without any further ado, I'm sure if you don't know them, you're going to get to know them real fast. I'm going to turn the floor to you. If you have anything to share, we give you rights to share the screen.
Well, thank you. So thank you for that wonderful introduction. We're really honored to be here today. We get excited every year we get to come talk to you. And hopefully we do have something new every year. This year, because we've been working remotely for so long, I actually learned how to create PowerPoints.
Yay.
I actually know how to do them. So I'm actually going to use a PowerPoint to give you a quick overview of the Patients' Rights Program and a little bit about how the Patients' Rights Program can be supportive to family members. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And let's see if we can get to, oh, I've got to open the PowerPoint, don't I? Let me get into the PowerPoint. Okay, put it in, let's see, did I put it in Marin County? I might have put it in Marin County. Let's see. Where did I just stick it? I was just putting it together for you, especially for you all. I wanted to get a chance to, there we go. And here we are. I've got it. Yeah, I learned how to create it, but I'm still learning how to run it. Okay, so let's see if you can you see my screen at all?
Not yet.
Not yet. Let me go back and try this. Okay, coming back here. Let's share the screen. And oh, there, that's why I didn't press share. There I am. Okay, let's do the slideshow.
Yes. Now
you can see it.
Perfect. Yes, I was going to say make it full screen. Yes.
So
we're good to go.
I'm the director of the Patients' Rights Advocates Program at Mental Health Association of Alameda County. And I have been doing this for over 25 years. So let me tell you a little bit about patients' rights. Every county must appoint a patients' rights advocate. An ACBH, or Alameda County's mental health system, contracts with the Mental Health Association to provide these mandated services to Alameda County's community. And Mental Health Association has over 4 decades of experience providing patients' rights advocacy services. Here in Alameda County, there are currently 10 patients' rights advocates, soon to be 16, including the program director and the assistant director. So let's talk about patients' rights advocates. We're a whole team. And we have 10 patients' rights advocates, including program director and assistant director. And what is the focus? Why is there a focus on mental health patients' rights? So the LPS Act, which is the group of laws that govern mental health treatment and the rights of patients, the first section of this act explains the rationale for the legislature and the necessity for these laws. So LPS was enacted because there was significant abuse in the provision of psychiatric care, particularly hospitalization and involuntary commitment. Prior to the passing of this act, people diagnosed as having a mental illness could be locked up solely with the signature of 2 doctors, and there was very little protection for people subject to commitment. One of the most important requirements in the LPS Act is the mandate that every county have patients' rights advocacy services. That's the why, now the what. Let me say one other thing. One of the reasons there are patients' rights advocates specifically for mental health clients is we know that the population tends to be a very vulnerable population, and the fact that they can be subject to involuntary detention. And once behind those walls, there's very little power. It's very disempowering. As much as it is important that we be able to protect people when their mental illness creates a dangerous situation, it's also important that we protect those people when they've lost their freedom and they don't have a lot of power. And you as family members only have a certain amount of power. You can't be there with them all the time. One of the great things about patients' rights advocates is we're allowed to go in there anytime we want. We don't have to ask permission. We don't have to wait for visiting hours. We can go in and we can see exactly what's happening in the facilities.
And they can try to help you find your loved ones too.
That's true. So what do patients' rights advocates do? Our first duty is investigation. We investigate complaints of abuse, neglect, and violations of patients' rights. We also work collaboratively with facilities to find solutions when the complaints are substantiated. So we just don't go in and police the facilities and say, well, let's see if we can find everything you're doing wrong, which is kind of how they used to do patients' rights when I started. When I became director, I really thought there might be a better way to do this. And that's when I started reaching out to family members, and I started forming relationships with the facilities so that we could work together to try to give the best that can be given to the clients. So we also monitor psychiatric facilities for compliance with codes and regulations. We advise facilities regarding their plans for improving compliance. So when they do have a problem, if they are out of compliance, and the laws change every year, and one of our jobs is to be on top of that and know what the new laws are, we can support the facilities and help make sure they know what those laws are and make sure that their policies and procedures are in compliance with those laws. We also provide representation. Patients who are on involuntary holds, if they are held past that first 72 hours, they're automatically entitled to a hearing. And patients' rights advocates provide the representation in those hearings. It's part of the due process whenever anybody has their liberty deprived. It's a constitutional right. And the right to representation is a constitutional right. So we represent patients in hearings regarding involuntary detention. The certification review hearing, which I just mentioned, happens after the 5150. It happens automatically. Now, when we represent someone in a hearing, if they've been placed on a 14-day hold, we first start out by letting them know, you know what, the facility really thinks you need some more time here. And we're wondering how it's going for you and how you feel about the idea of staying longer for treatment. So the first thing we do is let them know that their treatment team thinks they need more treatment. Now, this is a different way of doing this than a lot of patients' rights advocates do, because a lot of patients' rights advocates go in and they say to the client, hey, you know what? The facility's holding you against your will, and you can have a hearing. Do you want to go to a hearing and fight the hold? Which is not the best way to present it. So we pretty much say, hey, you know, the treatment team really feels like you could use some more time here. And I'm wondering if you agree with that. Now, ordinarily, if I were in person, I'd ask all of you what percentage you think of our clients who say, I want to go to a hearing. I want to see if the court will release me from the hospital. But I will tell you right now, it's only about 18%.
Oh.
Only about 18% of clients who are put on a 14-day hold actually request that the court review their case. So one of the reasons that might be is this. When somebody goes to a hearing and they ask the court to release them, they are requesting to be released against medical advice. And once we tell the client that, and I think a lot of advocates really do their clients a disservice by not being honest with them and saying, when you go to this hearing, if the court releases you, you are going to leave against your doctor's advice. The other thing we let our clients know is that there can be consequences. For some people, there's no consequences for being released against medical advice, but for some people there are. If a woman is in the midst of a custody hearing and she leaves the hospital against medical advice, that can be used against her in court. Or if CPS is looking to take children away from a parent and they leave against medical advice, that can be used against them. If they're on probation, there are a number of potential consequences for deciding to leave the hospital against medical advice. We always want to make sure that before we go and argue to have somebody released, they understand the full consequences. That might be why the percentage is so low, but I don't really think so. The truth is we do between 500 and 600 hearings a month, at least 500 to 600 certifications, which means a lot of people are being put on 14-day holds. And a lot of those people really don't object to being in the hospital. A lot of people know they need help. So we also represent in hearings when a doctor wants to medicate someone against their will. So if a person is being prescribed antipsychotic medication and they don't agree, the doctor can file a petition with the court for permission to give them that medication over their objection. The patient's rights advocates also represent the patient in those hearings. And in the hearing, they don't look at whether the person needs medication. They're looking at whether their illness is interfering with their ability to make a decision about it. That's to say, the doctor's supposed to tell them about the risks and the potential benefits of the medication. And then the patient's supposed to weigh those risks and benefits and say, Either I think the benefits outweigh the risks, or, those side effects really sound too horrible to me. I think I'd rather not take them. And what the court's deciding is this person's illness interfering with their ability to do that weighing of risks and benefits? Because sometimes people's illness really does get in the way. They might start to feel like all medicines are poison, or these are some of the things our clients tell us. I don't want to take the medication because I think they're all poison, or they're trying to do experiments on me, or I don't have a mental illness. And I'll tell you one thing, the way the court looks at it is if somebody says they don't have a mental illness, they're going to not prevail at this hearing. Because one of the things that the court looks at is, does the person even know they need help? And in this kind of a hearing, if they say they don't need help, they're not going to win at their hearing. They're automatically going to lose. That's just part of this type of a hearing that's looking at your mental capacity to understand about medication. One of the things they really want you to understand is this medication is supposed to treat an illness. So you have to have some awareness that you have an illness at all. And as you know, a lot of our clients don't. A lot of our clients think there is nothing wrong and there is nothing they need treatment for. I will tell you that in the majority of clients who go to these hearings, we're lucky if maybe 1% actually has capacity. The majority of clients who go into these hearings actually don't have capacity. So here's the interesting thing about our representation mandate. Our job is to represent whatever our client tells us they want. So if our client says, I want to get out against medical advice, our job is to put together the best legal argument we can for their position. And here's why that's important. They have a whole treatment team that's looking out for their best interest. They have a doctor and a nurse and social workers and mental health workers, all kinds of people who are looking out for their best interest, for their treatment. They only have one person to be their voice. And when you're looking at the potential losing your liberty, it's constitutionally important that you have somebody that helps you speak for yourself in a court hearing. So that's the job of the advocate. The challenge for advocates is, obviously, we know some of our clients are really ill. We know that they probably would not do very well if they left the hospital. Some of them do. I'll be honest. Sometimes people are being held and it's really not appropriate for them to be in a locked hospital. Obviously, for the majority of them, that's not the case. We know people tend to get discharged much, much sooner than is clinically appropriate. So generally, if somebody's still in the hospital, by the time they go into a hearing, they're probably still pretty ill. So we still have to represent their position, no matter what our gut tells us or what we would do if that were our loved one. We still have to do our job. So we might argue for the court to release our client from an involuntary hold and give our client the authority to request discharge from the hospital. One of the other duties we do is to provide education and training, like we're doing right now. We give presentations on patients' rights and mental health law to consumers, to providers, and community stakeholders, including family members. So providing education, I think, is one of the most important duties that we have. I think through educating people about rights and about the mental health system, we really can do a better job of providing treatment that's effective and humane. We also provide consultation to treatment staff and administrators so they can apply the law to treatment decisions. I've been doing this for a really long time. This is very rare for an advocate to do what I started doing, which is I gave my cell phone number to all the facilities and I answer it around the clock. I don't care if it's between 9 to 5. I don't care if we're on a holiday. I've taken calls while I'm on the ocean whale watching or sitting out on the beach or in Guatemala. I take calls because I think it's really important for them to be able to consult with us when they've got a tough situation and they want to make sure they're not going to violate someone's rights, or they've gotten a court order to release somebody and that person really isn't safe to be released. And they want to know what can they do because they're stuck between a legal order and an ethical obligation to keep people safe. These are the kinds of calls that I take from providers, and I take a lot of them. Almost every day now, I get calls from providers asking me things like, how do I get somebody into a bed? I've had the person in the emergency department for 7 days now, and I still haven't found a bed in a psychiatric hospital. How do I get a bed? You wouldn't think that would go to patients' rights, but it actually comes to me a lot. And I do a lot of advocating to get people out of the emergency department and into the psychiatric hospitals where they can really get the treatment they need from specialized professionals. So members of our team recognize the important role that family members play and their unique concerns. Generally, patients' rights advocates have not traditionally looked out for the interests of family members. When I was trained to be wary of family members because they usually want to keep people in the hospital. But over time, I began to realize how inappropriate that approach was, and the fact that most of our clients don't see their families as the enemy. They actually want their clients, their family members there. We recognize that most of our clients' main support comes from their families, and that most of our clients will be going home to live with their families after they are discharged from the hospital. So we know that it's really important, even in the adversarial atmosphere of a hearing, to try to keep these adversarial proceedings from interrupting the relationships in the family. What we really don't want to do is present the family as the enemy, even if they don't think their loved one should leave against medical advice. Our experiences, most of us, and Bev and I are family members also, and most of us are not likely to take our children out of the hospital against medical advice. So we don't really want to present to our clients that their family is against them. Most of the time, our advocates will say something to the effect of, hey, you know how family is. They really want what's best for their loved one. They're not really going to want to go against the doctor. They surely want you to get out as soon as you're well enough. They're anxious to see you, anxious to have you come home. Most of the time, that's the case. Most of the time, the family says, hey, you know what? When they're doing better, we really want them to come home. So that's pretty much how we present it to our clients. Slide. Where are you going to go? Okay. So members of our team recognize the importance of family members. Our clients often want their families to be present for important events in the hospital, such as their discussions about medication or attendance in hearings. I noticed that when I would ask somebody if they wanted their family to come to their hearing, and they would say, well, are they going to take me home? And a lot of times I'd have to say, no, they're not really supporting you leaving against medical advice. Do you want them to come to the hearing, even though they're not going to agree with you wanting to get out of the hospital? 90% of the time they said yes. And that really opened my eyes to the fact that they feel that their families make them feel safe. And even if their family members don't agree with them and want them to get treatment maybe that they don't want, they still feel better having them by their side, and they still want to be around them. So family members are often the most important sources of patients' rights complaints, particularly with incidences of abuse or neglect. Identifying a problem can open the door to finding solutions. A lot of us think, oh my goodness, I don't want to complain against the hospital. Aren't they just trying to help people? But you want to know what? Every once in a while, you're going to run into a bad egg, or somebody's going to make a mistake. And there are things that shouldn't happen. And it's important to keep our eyes out for those things, because I will tell you one thing: the administrators of the hospital do not want their staff hurting clients. So if I go to an administrator and I say, one of the clients reported that a staff member called them a name, or wouldn't give them their snack, or any number of range of types of abuse or neglect, and I tell the administrator that, they want to know who is it, and they want to investigate it just as badly as we do. So for a number of reasons, our clients are not especially inclined to report abuse or neglect or violations of rights. There are reasons our clients don't want to report problems. For one thing, a lot of them believe that they deserve the negative treatment. they don't really think they deserve to be treated well. That's been a common attitude that I've encountered when I've tried to do investigations. I've had clients tell me, I don't want you to look into this. I really deserved it. Fear of retribution. That's not a delusion. I will say that generally the facility is not going to take retribution on someone who makes a complaint. But in my 25 years, I will tell you that I definitely have encountered facility staff who would be incredibly cruel to someone if they knew they complained about them. And so we are very careful when we get a complaint not to put that person in any kind of risk, because we know we're going to take our keys and we're going to leave that facility, and the client who complained is still going to be there. So a lot of times we're going to wait until the client's discharged before we even begin an investigation. And then there's the trauma of recounting the experience. Even when the person gets out of the hospital and we say, okay, now we'd like to pursue what you reported to us. We really want to look into it. I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm out, it's behind me, and I don't want to talk about it. So given these three barriers to clients telling us what happens to them, most of our best complaints have come from families. Families are the ones who come to us and say, either my loved one reported that something happened to them, or I was visiting in the hospital and I saw something. It's not even necessarily their own loved one that they report about. Sometimes they see something happen to another client and they will call us and let us know what they saw. So family members are so important to our efforts to keep people safe, because they tend to be the ones who stand up and say, I want to do something about it. If there was abuse, neglect, some kind of violation, and the clients do not assert their rights very often. By conducting investigations and monitoring, we work to ensure your loved ones are safe, respected, and treated humanely when they receive treatment in facilities. We can sometimes locate missing loved ones who may have been hospitalized. As Bev just mentioned, we know that sometimes people disappear. And if you have a loved one who's been hospitalized a lot and you suddenly don't know where they are, and a lot of times the facilities won't tell you. You start calling hospitals, is my loved one there? I can neither confirm or deny whether they're here. They won't even look. So patients' rights advocates have access to the census, the lists of all the patients who are currently in the hospital. We're not going to violate your loved one's confidentiality, but we are going to try to approach them if we know they're in the hospital. We are going to approach them and say, hey, your family's really worried about you. Would it be okay? How about we go and call them and let them know where you are? They really need to know you're okay. Now, sometimes somebody will say, I don't want you to tell my family where I am. We will work to get something. If you are a family member and you are in that situation where you don't know where your loved one is, and your loved one's telling us, I don't want you to tell them where I am, we're going to say something to the effect of, okay, I won't tell them where you are. Please, can I at least tell them I know you're okay? I promise I won't tell them anything else. Can I at least let them know you're okay? We can almost always get at least that. Although the majority of the clients that we ask this say, I didn't know, they didn't know where I was. Let's go call them. Or yeah, you can call them, tell them this, tell them I want them to come visit me, or give them the phone number so they can call me. So we are pretty successful when we are asked to intervene with missing loved ones. So we're available to answer questions about subjects that concern family members, such as 5150s, confidentiality, how to communicate information to treatment professionals. So I'm going to stop and let you think about whether these are some of the topics you'd like to talk about while we get a chance to hear some from Bev and what Bev's been doing.
So before we transition, Francesca, there were some questions about 5150 versus 5250. Maybe you can take just one quick minute to explain that.
So 5150 is the beginning of the involuntary detention process. It's when there's the initial evaluation and treatment to see if somebody needs hospitalization. It's 3 days. It's 72 hours, actually. It's counted in hours. And so a person can be detained by law enforcement, by certain authorized professionals and taken to what's called an LPS facility. These are psychiatric facilities that can hold people involuntarily. Now, if they're held for 72 hours and the treatment team thinks they're still not safe to leave, they're still not safe to be in the community, they can put them on another hold. Now, I will let you know something. They're supposed to offer them voluntary status. They are supposed to give them the opportunity to agree to stay in the hospital. But we know that's not happening very much. So the 5250 is up to 14 days. And that's when the automatic hearing would take place. So that's the second hold. There are holds that can happen after that. If a person is still not safe to be in the community, there are some other kinds of holds that they can put them on, including this one you see on the last one of this list, conservatorships.
Okay, thank you. We'll come back to more questions, but this one that's also being asked, can someone please connect me with a Spanish-speaking patient advocate in San Mateo County? If there is a name, if you can just put it on the chat, that would be great. If you have a person.
Okay, we don't have a Spanish-speaking patients' rights advocate, although Marshall, who he is from the Philippines and he does a pretty good job of communicating with Spanish-speaking clients, but we also have interpreters. So what I'm going to do is suggest that you call or contact one of us after tonight, and we can try to help you with. Here in Alameda County, I do have a Spanish-speaking advocate, so you could talk to the advocate in Alameda County first, and he's actually fluent in English and Spanish, and then we can help connect you with the advocate in San Mateo County if you need some actual advocacy services.
Thank you. Let's continue with Beverly, but if you get a chance in between and you can let your contact information, share it with everyone, that'll be great. Both phone and email. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bev Bergman, and I've been working with the Mental Health Association for the last 28 years, believe it or not. It doesn't seem like it's been that long. The last 2 years, I've been working from home. I used to, and I will again soon, work in the lobby of John George Psychiatric Hospital, talking with families and other folks that drop in up there and help them navigate the system and learn about the resources in the community. Also help, help folks with mental illness that show up there and they don't meet the criteria, but they do want help. I try to navigate the system for them too and get them into some treatment that they want. I make phone calls for them and sit with them and try to find shelters or what other things that they might be looking for. I also help people fill out AB 1424 forms, which are important tools for families to have to help give information to the facility to help hold the person on a 5150. Basically, they use that information legally, your information about your loved one and the history of the illness, to provide them enough evidence to try to hold them on a 5150. You can also contact me if you're having trouble contacting the social worker or the doctor on the unit that your loved one is, and I can try to help, intercede if you're getting blockaded somehow from getting to them, even though you might have a confidentiality agreement or release of information signed already. Sometimes you'll run into folks that just don't call back. So I will call them, and usually we'll get a call back if I call and make a complaint. There is a new CEO up there at John George, Patty Estepet, who's been a NAMI member and board member for about, 28 years herself, and runs a support group on Tuesdays from 12 to 1 every week of the year. And Peggy Rahman and I also are in that support group, so you're all welcome to come to that. I will be going back up to John George in May, probably 2 afternoons a week to start with, because we're still concerned about, the pandemic and what if this B2 will come out, this new variant. We're still concerned about that. I'll try to stay safe as possible in an N95 and help folks up there. I have been doing this so long now, and I have friends, and our daughter has bipolar disorder and alcohol addiction. We've been working with IHOT team, which is absolutely essential to help people when they are roadblocked in helping their loved one. They are especially skilled in helping people that don't have insight in that they have a mental illness or a mental health concern. You can contact the Access phone number and we can put it in the chat for you. If you're having that kind of a situation and you want some help, you contact Access and ask for an in-home outreach team. They interview the family members first and find out what's going on. And then they'll set up an appointment to come out to your house or wherever the person is and try to start a relationship with them. And they can do short-term case management up to 90 days, and sometimes you can get an extension.
They're not actually case managers. What they're trying to do is engage people in treatment. And what's special about IHOT is that they're very persistent. The 90 days is part of that persistence, that they will keep coming back and trying to connect with the person to give about 90 days to see if they can voluntarily get them to participate in treatment. And I can tell you that some of the clients that get referred to IHOT who don't agree to engage in treatment within the 90 days end up getting a petition for AOT or assisted outpatient treatment, which is sort of court-ordered outpatient treatment. So some of the clients that get referred to IHOT may end up in the AOT program. I will also tell you by now, I've interacted a lot with the IHOT teams and with the people who work in the AOT programs, and they are probably the biggest miracle workers in our system. I would say they have some of the biggest success rate of any of the programs that I've seen, that I interact with in Alameda County. I was going to ask you, Bev, have you mainly been working on cases of people who are in the hospital, or have you been doing other kinds of cases?
I help people in the community generally, and also people that have loved ones at Santa Rita Jail and other facilities in the county. Many people call us from outside of the county that have loved ones here that don't know what's going on with them, and I try to hook them up with the people they need to talk with. As Francesca was saying, the IHOT team is essential. I feel that they're essential. When I first started working here for the first 10 years, you would have to tell someone your loved one has to get so sick to get help in our county as to almost die before IHOT. They are a miracle. Like Francesca said, they have saved many lives. Yeah, many, many lives. I can't say enough about them. It was the most horrible thing to have to be on the phone with families and say, I'm sorry, we can't get your loved one help until they're so ill, they're almost dying in our county, because it was so difficult to 5150 anybody, because they weren't dangerous to themselves or others. So the grave disability came in, and that was very difficult for the police, who are the people primarily, and sometimes now still, are the ones that were trying to evaluate the person in the home, whether they were gravely disabled or not. And they were telling parents, you have to kick them out of the house, don't provide them food or anything, and then we'll help. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's a horrible thing to have to tell parents then, and now we don't have to do that anymore. I want to know what's happening in Tri-Valley, how you guys are dealing with things during the pandemic. Has it been a lot harder for you guys to get care for your loved ones? What's happening at the local hospital there? Are you having any difficulties? And you can always call me and I'll try to help you solve problems anytime. I'll leave my phone number in the chat for you guys. I always help, always encourage families too, if you're interested, to check out some of Behavioral Health Care's committees. You can zoom into their committees and listen to what's happening within behavioral health care, like Criminal Justice Committee or Children's Committee, different committee meetings. Marcia knows more about this than I do, but you can sit in on the committee and see the behind the scenes workings of what's going on, what things are being discussed, what's being proposed. And at the end of the meeting, they have community time that you can make comments. What else?
Well,
I'm on a committee called the MDFT, Multiple Disciplinary Forensic Team. It has like BART and all the police departments in the county talk about particular people at the meeting each month that are having very severe problems in the community, either with substance abuse or mental illness or both, that are having, tremendous amount of calls to 911. And we all try to get together and see how we can help this person. And many of the different police departments didn't know that that person was being picked up by BART, in all different parts of the different counties and then by different police departments. So once they get all the pieces together, they can really help the person much better. You had a comment?
Yeah, I was going to say that there is one thing I can talk about that's a pretty positive movement in Alameda County right now. One of the things that Bev and I have been advocating for a long time is to reduce the dependence on law enforcement as first responders to mental health crises. We all know that members of law enforcement are not mental health professionals, and yet Alameda County had very few mental health professionals authorized to go out and respond to crises or write 5150s. Now, recently, there's been some response to some of this advocacy. We've had a lot of other voices joining us, including law enforcement, saying this isn't really appropriate to be depending almost exclusively on law enforcement as the first responders. We also know that people have been killed when law enforcement ends up seeing the person as a threat and either injures them or kills them. It is much more important for us to have mental health professionals responding to people who are in crisis. And what has happened is that the county has several programs now of different kinds of mental health professionals who are first responders to mental health crises, including more mobile crisis teams. There's the
Oakland Fire Department.
The Oakland Fire Department. We also started a pilot with 5 different outpatient agencies that in the course of providing services, they have been authorized to write their own 5150 so they don't have to call on law enforcement. And the truth is that is reducing the numbers of 5150s because they are much more effective at getting people to voluntarily go into treatment. So we don't have as many involuntary holds as we move away from depending on law enforcement so much.
Okay.
Well, I am a big advocate of self-care and taking care of ourselves. We've been a parent of a child that's 36 now. Both of us have this child that we've been looking after in our home for a long time, and it's been rough sometimes. And we, depend on our community to talk with about, what's going on with their kids too. And it's very helpful not to feel alone and, alone with these things, because you really can feel alone sometimes with your problem in your home. So I'm glad to see all you here today, and you're reaching out with other people in the community to seek help and support, and you're supporting others.
So Beverly, let me read a couple of questions as we go through this. The hospital complaint. So the comment says, my hospital complaint is that they refuse to accept my daughter on 5150. She lives in a mental health recovery center, and they became unable to help her with a grave disability and sought help in the form of 5150. Due to delusions, she is incontinent and refuses help with showering and putting on dry clothes for 15-20 hours on a frequent basis. She stays in urine soaked and other hours on end, becomes violent, kicking, hitting. So, and they insist on helping her clean up, refuses meds. Hospital says she's not a danger to herself or others, so can't take her. Facility is expected to handle it. Needs meds against her will. Is that really appropriate? And the law of refuse, and the law to refuse 5150 care.
So I'm curious what program she's in and what hospital refused her.
Janet, do you want to go ahead or type or speak up? Yeah, please go ahead, speak up.
She's living at Redwood Place in Castro Valley. It's a mental health recovery center. And John Muir Behavioral Health in Concord refused her.
Okay, so she's living in a dual diagnosis program, which is for both developmentally disabled and people with mental illness.
Right.
We get a lot of complaints about Contra Costa County. I'll say that there are lots of people who have problems getting their loved one into the hospital or getting them kept in the hospital to the point where they're even minimally recovered. This is a lot due to a lack of resources. But also what I found is that a lot of the doctors working in the hospitals don't have a really good understanding of grave disability. When I do trainings on grave disability, one of the things I focus on, which almost nobody trains on, is how hygiene plays a part in grave disability. Because grave disability is specifically about food, clothing, and shelter, people will say, well, hygiene's irrelevant. But the fact is that what I've been teaching, at least law enforcement and some of the mental health professionals that I train, is to write up how the hygiene could impact food, clothing, and shelter. And one of the ways that this is the case, and I really recommend that it gets written on the 5150, that the person's hygiene is so bad and that their living situation depends on living with other people. And when your hygiene is that bad, you're not going to be welcome in the place where you get your shelter, because other people are not going to be able to live with someone whose hygiene is so bad that they're too unpleasant to be around or even a health hazard to be around. So I always recommend writing on the 5150 that the person's hygiene is so bad that it's going to interfere with their ability to keep their shelter, which involves living with other people. I say the same thing about food sometimes. The person's hygiene is so bad, they're not going to be able to access food because they're not going to be welcome anywhere where they need to access food. So hygiene does play a part in grave disability, especially when it gets to the levels that you're describing here.
I think sometimes the hospitals don't know what to do with developmentally disabled people, and they put it back on regional center. Regional center puts it back on the hospital, and then you have this person stuck sometimes in the middle and not getting what they need.
I do know the name of what's called the client's rights advocate. That's the advocate who works on behalf of people with developmental disabilities. And he's an attorney, and he will get involved, and he will pressure providers to give the person care if they are in a situation like you're describing, where it's turning into literal neglect because they can't be cared for. This person, his name is Arthur Lipscomb, and I have called on him numerous times when we've had clients with developmental disabilities who are not getting the professional kind of care that they need, and he will get involved and advocate on their behalf. So that's a potential resource in a case like this. The other thing I would have to say is that I'm guessing that John Muir also is saying that she's not gravely disabled because she has a roof over her head and because she has food. But the law states that for a person to not be gravely disabled, they have to be able to safely survive with the assistance being offered to them. Somebody in your daughter's situation, the argument would be that she may be surviving, but she is not safely surviving, and that does not meet the standard of the definition of grave disability. They must be safely surviving.
And she's in jeopardy of losing her housing, it sounds like,
It's potential.
which is very
Yeah.
serious.
Can you give me the contact information for this Arthur Lipscomb?
Sure. Let me look that up while you guys are
So another
talking.
question here.
Okay.
Mental Health Advisory Board.
Let's see.
So while I'm sorry, someone was talking.
Go ahead.
While she's looking, we have another comment that both mental health professionals and law enforcement personnel need continuing education and training to ensure that they themselves are mentally intact and not on the burnout path. Boy, we know this burnout path from family to service providers to all that, but I thought it's mandatory, isn't it? Continuing education in the field out there.
I'm very hard of hearing, and I couldn't hear you, unfortunately.
Let me get it closer.
Well,
Okay.
in recent years, a lot of police officers have gone through CIT training,
Right.
crisis intervention training, to learn more about how to handle with mental health crises.
Right.
But maybe restate your question for Beverly.
So Beverly, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, better. I'll speak a little louder. So it's actually a comment. I don't know if it was a question, but it says both mental health professionals and law enforcement personnel need continuing education and training to ensure that they themselves are mentally intact and not on a burnout path.
I
And
agree.
yeah, is that happening, or is it a wish?
No.
I thought there's continuing education in a lot of places.
Well, people have continuing education for their licenses. I'm not sure exactly what they have to take in that, the courses, you know, and the police that we're aware of voluntarily attend 5150, you know, the training. Is that your understanding?
They're asking about self-care, I think.
No.
Self-care for,
No. This is burnout, and this is for people who providing services, I believe.
About providers like cops and service providers.
Nurses,
burnout,
doctors,
they have
service
some kind of-
providers, yes.
I
Yeah.
don't think that there's hardly anybody focused on helping to prevent burnout, or what do we call that?
Compassion fatigue.
Compassion fatigue.
No.
So I can jump in with one example. My son was working with IHOT, and I know they come in twos, right? One works with consumer, one works with the family, and there was a time when they see a burnout, especially with consumer, a peer-to-peer specialist, right? And they would take some time out off because it can be very draining. So they have to, the problem is a person has to know themselves and has to ask for it. And if they're working and money is an issue and they can't take the time off, I guess, I don't know what the rule is. That's the question.
Well, I think one of the problems that we're facing is a retention of workers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people are burning out, giving up on working with the mentally ill, and hard to retain people because of salaries and also the stress involved in the kind of employment that is. I mean, every agency that I know of has probably around a 30%, vacancy rate in their personnel, and trying to hire. Every time we go to meetings with the county, everybody's saying, we're trying to hire. And then other people were saying we can't retain them because the rents are going up and they can't afford to live in Alameda County anymore. So there's a lot of that going on too, besides burnout. The retention rate is causing problems in full service partnership programs that I've dealt with recently, are supposed to come out up to 3 times a week. And sometimes the family that I've been working with had nobody come for 2 months. And now we're getting them back to 1 time a week. So it's extremely frustrating that you have to call and complain when something like that is happening, but that's the only way that you'll get what you need. Otherwise, if nobody was complaining, they would just ignore the person sometimes.
Wow. Tori, I see you have your hand up and I see your message. Why don't you go ahead and ask your question? Are you muted?
Sorry, trying to get my mute off.
No problem.
Okay, Tori.
Hi. So back to the discussion about who can write a 5150 hold. I've heard from, I think, a NAMI California talk that this is decided on a county by county basis, and then the Board of Supervisors votes on it. Or is that
No, the mental health director can appoint.
the mental health director? So if people are interested,
But Karen Tribble has delegated that authority to Dr. Chapman and Stephanie Lewis. And Stephanie Lewis and I were doing the 5150 training together, but she's doing it now exclusively. And one of the things that Dr. Chapman did was throughout the pandemic, begin authorizing more and more of the emergency departments to be able to write their own 5150 so they don't have to call the police in when somebody needs a 5150 who's in an emergency department. So they have been, after a lot of advocacy, by the way, authorizing or delegating to quite a few more mental health professionals to have the authority to detain people on 5150s.
What about EMTs? Can they?
Only select EMTs in Alameda County have been designated. They are not designated like by default. They have to individually go through the training and be designated. And the EMTs who have been designated in Alameda County work alongside a mental health professional.
Okay, so, I mean, I'm with FASME, and there's a lot of talk of there aren't enough people that are able to write a 5150, you know, and the problem of having to bring in
Yeah, we
police.
have 15 years of screaming and kicking over that.
Okay, so it seems like you are the person, if somebody has a particular group that they think should be authorized to do it, they should go to you, and you know how to advocate for that.
We've been doing that. We've
You
been
do?
advocating.
Yeah,
I've
sounds
been
like it.
involved in, I actually sit on the committee of the new pilot that authorized these 5 outpatient programs to be able to write 5150.
Uh-huh.
I do know who. I know the specific individuals who who are involved in deciding who's going
Okay.
to be authorized.
Okay, well, you sound like a fabulous resource for trying to figure out that little piece. I also have a question, if I can ask it. I'm not sure.
Go
I don't. Okay. So my son is, you know, 27-year-old adult, and he's insured as a disabled adult on my private Kaiser insurance. Now, Kaiser uses John George as their PES. They don't have their own psychiatric emergencies. I assume every other big Alta Bates and all of them, all the private insurance are funneling everybody through John George. And that is part of the overwhelm of this massively crowded John George PES, where people are held for days at a time, sleeping on the floor in a crowded.
Not now. Actually, the census in PES has not been that big lately. And I think I know why. That, what you just described, is a little different these days because Dr. Chapman authorized so many of these emergency departments to write their own 5150s. They have been writing 5150s for people who have ended up in the emergency department, and that includes Kaiser. But then Kaiser has to call around to the different psychiatric hospitals and find their own bed. They either try to get them to John George, or they do have to try to find their own bed. And that can get really backed up. And not only that, but what I'm getting a lot of complaints about from the emergency departments is these hospitals are cherry picking. They're saying, well, tell me all about this person, and then I'll tell you whether we have a bed.
Yes. So my son can be a very large, imposing person. And he's also, you know, he's a sweet guy, but not on a bad day. So
I know family members who've successfully advocated and called and gotten beds for their own children.
okay,
I know they've done it. They've called Herrick. They've called different hospitals and said, my son's waiting for a bed in an emergency department. I want to tell you about him because you might have heard some things. I know families who have successfully gotten their kids into beds, gotten them moved up the waiting list.
Yeah, no, my main problem, this has happened many times. I live in Contra Costa. My son's been in Alameda a lot, is that he gets 5150 by police, put in an ambulance. They will not take him to Kaiser. They will only take him to John George or Martinez because those have locked facilities which will actually hold somebody safely. And they say it's too much liability taking them to an unlocked private hospital. Therefore, even though he has private insurance, he will only be taken to John George or Martinez. Martinez has been the absolute worst in premature, uneducated, releases.
So here's a one thing that could work for or against this, and that is if he doesn't want to go straight to John George and wants to end up, say, at a medical hospital, he can say he's got a splitting headache and he needs medical assessment. The only thing that could go wrong with that is he could land in the emergency department, and then it might take a while to get him into one of the beds that Kaiser contracts for, like Heritage.
Yeah. No,
But
I mean, my
it
problem
is
is,
one other option, which is to say, I've got this interminable headache. I really need to see a doctor for my headache,
Or you
and
can
I'll
say
end up
that-
in emergency
you can
room.
say to the EMT, my son has been complaining of, some physical.
What?
yeah, no, that's a workaround. I'm kind of more interested in the systemic change so that Kaiser actually has a locked facility. If my son ends up there, or anybody's son, they can't run out into the street, have to be brought back by police, and the ambulances will take them directly to an uncrowded facility that is, decent. Or I shouldn't say John George is undecent, but sleeping in a chair or on a floor and with 60 other people hasn't, for days at a time, has been horrible.
Unfortunately, that's kind of where it's at with a lot of them. I mean, John George doesn't have people sleeping on the floor at this point.
25 to 30 people at the most.
Yeah, there's 25 to 30 people at the most in there. The only thing that I can say is that every single one of these facilities has a tendency to release people fairly quickly. Marin County tends to hold people longer. Marin County's just got a different experience with clients, and so they do tend to hold people longer. And then San Mateo holds people a little bit longer, but their county hospital's pretty full right now. We do have a couple of, Kaiser contracts with Heritage. So if he were in a Kaiser emergency department, they would be calling Heritage and Fremont Hospital to look for beds.
They put somebody up in St. Helena that had Kaiser, a family member.
And then they have a facility themselves down in Santa Clara County, which I hear is pretty decent. The Santa Clara County Kaiser, the one in San Jose, I hear is pretty decent.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, no, I'm just more interested in why they don't have safe PESs in every.
Because one, people are getting 5150 who don't belong in the hospital. So then PES has to weed through them to figure out which ones they really need to hospitalize. This is something I have been talking to professionals about for quite a while now. Do not send people on a 5150 because you can't think of anything else to do with them. Do not send anyone except people who are truly unsafe to be out in the community so that we don't overload these facilities. The other systemic thing, which is my big soapbox thing, is to be putting people who are on conservatorship in the community unless they need to be locked. Because we have a lot of people taking up these locked beds because they'll only keep people on conservatorship while they're in a locked facility. And I have been advocating for a long time for us to keep conservatorships in place when people leave facilities so they don't have to stay behind locked walls, and people who really need those locked beds then can get access to them.
A lot of times John George will serve as a detox facility. Many people in the community are on meth or some other drug that makes them look like they have schizophrenia. They are seeing things and hearing things and running wild, and they end up at John George and they sleep overnight and get released the next day. And that takes up more space.
Just on the meth front, I have had multiple times when my son comes out with a negative test, it will be in his record because I requisitioned all of his records, and he will be reported by doctors as being on meth.
But it's not.
Oh no.
Yeah, that's happened again and again.
But the blood test or the.
It's a negative. They just they must be speculating or just an error. I mean, the records are pretty
I've heard that
horrific.
too.
So
In the record.
I would not trust what a doctor says in a record or verbally about meth, because I've seen so many errors on my son's front where there's actually a blood test that proves he's not got meth, and they're just
I've
wildly
heard these stories
speculating.
too. Oh, I have. I've heard them quite a bit. And people then end up with this stain on their reputation, and they're not drug users. And then they get rejected by psych hospitals because the psych hospitals say, oh, well, what they really have is a drug problem.
Yeah, he's been discharged prematurely for having meth in his system with a negative meth test.
Wow.
That's where the grievance comes in.
Okay, I will send you one.
Well, actually, since it's Kaiser, and I will tell you that Kaiser is one of the best places to file a grievance because Kaiser takes their grievances very seriously. I have gotten almost everything I wanted when I filed a grievance with Kaiser.
Really? I
I always get my needs met when I file a grievance. They don't like them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I will do that.
Wow,
Thank you.
that's a great ending then. Okay, I'd like to go to the next person who wants to ask a question. I want to say Lindbergh, but I don't know the first name, last name, so please go ahead.
I'm not seeing these on here.
You muted. If you want to unmute yourself, you can ask your question, please.
Hi there. I'm actually Linda Burgess.
Ah, Linda. Okay. I'm guessing. I apologize. I'm just reading what I see.
I got to figure out how to change that. But there's some familiar faces. I actually attended a NAMI meeting way back when Livermore Library was
Yeah.
Yes.
still a thing.
Yeah,
And
we
you
were
were one of the
at
guests.
library.
You were
So you're
actually
local.
there. Marcia, I've actually spoken with you way back when my son first became ill. It's been many years now since, and now it's just spiraled into multiple things. He's at Santa Rita right now, incarcerated. And he's been there since December.
Wow.
He started breaking into my house and stole my car. And so I had him arrested, thinking that I could get him help that way since I was getting help no other way. And so now they're trying to deem him incompetent because he's refusing all
Help in his own defense. Yeah. Well, I heard that there's 600 people waiting for incompetent to stand trial bed in a state hospital right now.
Yeah, it's amazing, this whole process. It's I almost feel like yanking him out of there if I can and drop charges because it's really getting nowhere. I mean,
I
they
hear you.
say, yes, if they deem him incompetent, then they'll find, basically he'll be put on a list, a waiting list till something becomes
He's been in jail
available,
for a
whether
year or
it's
so.
Fairmont, which obviously that's not going to happen because they hardly have any beds, or possibly Napa State.
Well, there's a bunch of different state hospitals that they look at. There's one in Los Angeles called Metro, which is a big one, but they're all full and have a huge waiting list. So people are going to end up sitting in Santa Rita for a year or so waiting on that bed. So
So I don't really have a question. I was just jumping on to get a little support going.
So has the public defender talked about behavioral health court?
But isn't that something he has to agree to? Because I think right now
Yes,
what's
it is.
happening is that he's refusing to talk.
Oh, okay. He can't.
I'm not even sure. We can't even, it's just ridiculous. We originally,
agree to
the
anything.
attorney tried to get a wellness check done, and it took like a month for somebody finally to get back to us. And I found out, just because I got a piece of the mail from behavioral health, that they actually, appeared that they had sent him to John George like the first week in February, like nobody knew. And then like a week later, she got a thing back, some kind of notice from the jail, basically saying that he wasn't 5150 material. He wasn't trying to hurt himself or harm others. Yeah, well, we knew that. We were trying to find out what state of mind he was in. Is he speaking? So we absolutely got no information.
Wow.
And so now it got to a point where they got a court order to get a doctor to do a report. Well, he went to go do the observation. Apparently, he can refuse that too.
Right.
So,
Oh, no.
Yeah, he
so
can
I
refuse
haven't
to
had
talk to
contact.
everybody.
Nobody's had contact with him. The attorney, the caseworker, nothing.
No.
You just can't even get an answer from anybody. It's ridiculous. So we have no idea what's going on.
You know, there's something interesting, and that is that the law changed a little while back to allow them to do conservatorship straight from the jail. I don't know how they're utilizing them yet at Santa Rita, but I'm just throwing that out there because, you know, they may not be doing them, but as long as you know it's legally possible, it is something. It's just something to keep in your tool bag to advocate for if that ends up to be appropriate, where you find out he's not eating, he's you know, not taking decent care of himself in the jail, he's not able to socialize. There's a number of behaviors in the jail that constitute grave disability that are not the same as the behaviors out in the community.
But how can we even find out like what his behaviors are? I don't even have, and apparently
Have
he
you
didn't
called
sign
the
any kind of
behavioral health care
authorization.
unit? Have you called the behavioral health care unit?
I have not, but the caseworker attempted
I can
to.
get you their phone number.
I have the phone number. Thank you.
Yeah, you should call there and say, I'm really concerned about my son. Can you give me any information about him? And sometimes they will try to go by his cell and ask him, but they might say he won't talk to us. You know, that might be the
I mean,
thing.
we've
that you
tried the
gotta get
video
back.
visitation. He's denied everything. He wasn't appearing in court. At one point, we were going to have him extracted, and then he ended up in quarantine. And then it's been very frustrating.
I would say that what I tell people is that even though it feels futile to do so, don't quit. Like, keep bugging. The really squeaky wheels around here, they get the oil. I know this. We know the people who make a lot of noise, and you think that would get the door slammed in your face, but Alameda County tends to get intimidated by family members who are really noisy and really are really assertive about getting their loved ones care. They do tend to break down.
Yeah.
So I always say persistence. Here in Alameda County, persistence is the key to getting things done.
Call the
So
board
your
of-
suggestion
call
is
your
to
board
call
of
the behavioral
supervisor
health?
and make a complaint.
I don't think they heard your last comment.
I said, call your board of supervisor and make a complaint against the jail.
But as far as trying to get any information, contact the behavioral health services at the jail.
Oh, yes. You might just get the right person. The time you call, you might just get the person who's willing to go that extra mile for you. Sometimes it really is the individual whose ear you get.
Yeah, because I know the caseworker attempted to go through behavioral health, but she didn't get anywhere.
Where's the caseworker? What program's she with?
It's through Alameda County. It's whoever, like the public defender. She works with the public defender that I'm working with
Oh,
from Dublin.
I wonder if it's Penny.
It's V
V.
Lee, VYLY.
Well, I've heard the name.
VILEE, V Lee.
Wait, I've heard that name.
Is that person with FERC?
Yeah, that sounds like the
VY is an advocate. with
VY, and then last name's Lee. I think it's LEE.
I think that's a mental health association employee.
Sounds like a FERC advocate, family advocate.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
Are you in touch with FERC?
Mm-mm.
No.
No, how did
Somebody
that
else,
happen?
somebody else with that name.
I've heard the name for sure. I don't
Anyway,
know.
she's supposedly a caseworker and she's assigned to the case, but she hasn't gotten anywhere either. So he's denied her, he's denied the attorney, he's denied me, his siblings.
So he won't talk to
Well,
anybody.
Pardon me?
your son won't talk to anyone.
I guess, I don't know. I don't even know if he's talking or not. I can't even get an answer. I mean, I stopped by the jail yesterday just to see if I could find out anything, and there's absolutely no help at all.
Well,
My phone number is in the chat. If you'd like to call me, maybe we can talk a little more. We can strategize.
Okay. I've actually talked to you. I have your phone number from before
Oh, good.
when
Well,
you
if
were
need
at, because
help-
you were inside John George.
Yeah,
Here it is.
yeah. I'll try to help. Of course, I will try to help in any way I can.
I think the Lee is
Okay.
defender.
Appreciate it.
it's amazing to think how much we learn, but when we're in the bind, where we're in emergency, all the knowledge we have, all the thoughts just fly out. I know Marcia has held my hand several times, and it's amazing how we continuously do this. We educate ourselves, so when we need, at the time of the need, we can pull it together. So the time is flying very fast. We do have another 9 minutes. I just want to take this time. Once again, Rosemary, you're next. Just want to echo Marcia's comment. We do have support groups 2 times a month, and she has shared the information with her phone number there. Please, we're more than happy to welcome you. Okay, all of us, and we all go through different times. We're still looking for that break. But go ahead, Rosemary, your turn.
So we found out that B is a social worker with the public defender's office.
Oh, mhm.
So that's where B works with.
But now we know who she is actually. I located her contact information.
Yeah. Okay, regarding Santa Rita, I was reading again a few days ago how the county's being sued again.
Yep.
Because of inadequate mental health services at Santa Rita and the suicides.
Yep.
So do either you, Beverly or Francesca, do you provide any advocacy services for people who are incarcerated at Santa Rita? Or is that supposed to be handled through their behavioral health services?
They
mean,
do
who's
not.
who's supposed to
contract
advocate
for-
for the client?
Right, they don't.
They don't
advocate.
they don't provide patients' rights advocates for the jail. We used to have a jail unit over at South County, and we would go there. But going to Santa Rita, we barely have the advocates to cover the hospitals.
Right, and I
Yeah.
just do it because I'm interested in criminal justice. That's why I help. I'm not contracted to do criminal justice, but it's a concern of mine. And I help,
Yeah,
you know.
I mean,
when
so
families
just-
call, I try to help in any way I can to advocate for their loved one.
Yeah, I didn't think there was an advocate for them, but it just sort of occurred to me, since you were both going to be here, that maybe I overlooked some information
No,
from
there
the
are
past
some-
or whatever.
Some agencies that are in the community, and I can't think of it right now, that are doing some work in the criminal justice realm, trying to get justice for people.
Yeah,
They go to the criminal justice mental health meetings.
And Disability Rights California is one of the groups that sued them, and they do have a phone number. And sometimes they'll take an individual case. Not often because they like class action, but they are one of the agencies that is suing Alameda County and Santa Rita Jail.
uh-huh.
They just settled, and they're going to be having an oversight from the federal government.
Mhm.
Okay, so Francesca, I have a quick question. With a group of 16, you said all the advocacy, your group is growing, and we're so happy. And thank you, by the way, the great work you guys are doing. What is the number of people in Alameda County in a mental illness that's being supported? What is that number? Is there a magic number? Is that roughly what it is? We go by percentage of the population. What is the numbers you have?
I don't actually have the number. I don't know the numbers. And one of the things is that not everybody we serve is just an Alameda County resident. We have to serve anybody who's in a facility in Alameda County. And so that means that patients who come from other counties are also served by our office. So we serve 6 facilities pretty much every day of the week, because those are the facilities where we're doing hearings. Now we are going to start a new division of patients' rights next fiscal year that's going to focus on investigation and monitoring only, so that those advocates will not be wrapped up in doing hearings and will be able to focus solely on quality of care, what's going on in the facilities. We'll be going in regularly to look at charts, to talk to clients. My goal is to get into the emergency departments as well. So we're going to have a lot more oversight next fiscal year.
Okay, so one of my pet peeves in general is obviously we all go through this emergency phase. Well, sky is falling for the family members and everyone. Then we get some sort of stability. And the next big question is transitional housing, okay? We here in NAMI Tri-Valley, we're starting to talk permanent housing is non-existent, and then transitional housing. I'm at that phase of dealing with transitional housing issues. And what is Alameda County's solution to that? Do you have any answers?
Bay Area Community Services would be the agency I would call and talk with them. They have lists and they have people that help people sign up for different housing, to be on a list for subsidized housing in Alameda County. But they have actual workers, and that's their job, just the housing section of Bay Area Community Services.
Okay, so my son got kicked out of the Bonita house, and he is now in a private facility that I pay for, but he can't stay there long. And I'm trying to decide where he can go. And room and board is the only answer, which is really, really scary because he's going to slide right back. And I don't know where to take him.
Yeah, because the only other option are these 14-day places, the crisis residential. We have 3 crisis residential programs, and they keep people for up to 14 days, so that they've used them to transition people from the hospital, but we're also now focused on using them when somebody's sort of decompensating and heading towards the direction of maybe needing to be in the hospital. They could go to a crisis residential program and maybe get stabilized before they need a 5150. That's sort of the level that I know about. Like you said, there's so much crisis. But of course, we're like focusing on the people who are teetering on the edge. And those who've kind of come back from the edge, at least Bev and I, we haven't had the ability to get involved at that level because we're constantly putting out fires all the time.
Yeah.
I
That's
work
a very
14
good-
hours a day.
Yeah, no, we realize that. And we are grateful. I'm just going to end on that note. We have 2 minutes left. I am personally grateful for you both taking the time. This is for your work,
Yes.
and just clock never stops ticking and continuously 24/7. Yeah.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
We're here for you. If you need anything, call me. If I don't know
Yes,
the answer to the question, I'll find out.
Yeah.
we'll be
Thank-
calling Beverly.
Yeah.
I'm sure you will.
Thank you
We're
very
all
much.
together, families together.
Thank you for having
Thank
us
you.
tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for
Thank you
inviting
so
Thank you
us.
much.
both.
Thank you,
Thank you
all of
all.
you.
For your hard work.
Thank you.
Take care,
Thank you
everybody.
very
Take care of
much.
yourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your support. Thank you, everyone joining us, and you get a lot of information. Don't hesitate to contact us. You got Marsha's phone, you got my phone from the flyer. If you're here, then you must have seen the flyer. So my phone is there, just we're a text away, we're a call away. Okay?
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Thank
everybody.
you
Thank
very
you.
much, everyone.